Hey guys, tonight we'll journey to the ramparts of ancient Troy, where a single choice born of desire set empires ablaze. Imagine dawn's bruised purple sky and the weight of destiny pressing on your chest as Paris, an exiled prince turned fateful suitor, ignites a war that echoes through millennia. Before we begin, take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe, so you never miss another historical sleep tale. Now, dim the lights, grab your favorite blanket, and let the soft murmur of ancient clay tablets and midnight vows carry you off to sleep. You awaken before dawn on the ramparts of Troy, in the 12th century BCE, the horizon smeared with a bruised, purplish glow that feels like long-healed scars across the sky. You stir as the first breath of morning air carries the briny tang of the Aegean Sea onto ancient stones. Your fingertips trace the cold, coarse masonry beneath the sky's deep indigo prelude to day. The wind whips through your hair, echoing the clamour of merchants at the crowded harbour. Every exhale carries brine and distant thunder, a reminder of the sea's relentless presence. Your cheek presses against the ancient masonry, imbued with the weight of countless footsteps and fallen empires. The horizon bleeds from violet to a tentative shade of rose, a subtle herald of the day to come. A hush deepens across the rampart as the first pale light seeps through the ruins. Your heartbeat thunders in time, with waves crashing against mosaicked walls, forging an unrelenting cadence. A lone gull cries overhead, its piercing wail slicing through the pre-dawn stillness. You sense shadows dancing beneath low-hanging clouds, promising both awe and something more ominous just out of sight. Dust motes swirl around your boots, a quiet reminder that even here, stillness is forbidden. The damp air clings to your throat, carrying the weight of the sea's breath. The rampart stones, pitted and worn, whisper secrets of a city braced for war at the edge of history. You imagine the clutch of bronze in your hand and the weight of leather straps on your wrist, ready for whatever beast or champion emerges. Each breath you draw is a negotiation between survival and something like longing. The dawn chorus here is muted, traded for the distant clang of blacksmith hammers on battered shields. A solitary torch guttering nearby casts a flicker that dances across the stones. You lean forward, nose twitching at the smell of charred olive wood and spilled wine from last night's feast. A cold wind slides under your tunic, reminding you to draw the fabric closer, to seek warmth in a world that offers little. You feel the cool breeze caress your skin, a brief respite before the coming storm. Far below, fishermen haul in nets that glimmer with silver fish, their plunder bound for palace feasts. You picture them hauling nets in practiced harmony, each motion bound to ancient rhythms of devotion, fear, and sacrifice. The rampart's edge feels dangerously close, yet your pulse slows as you acknowledge the precarious calm. You hear the creak of a catapult arm settling into its morning position, a reminder that peace here is just the lull before thunder. The sky's pastel gradient creeps upward, almost too swiftly to follow. You wonder how many heroes woke here, bracing for a fate that songs would immortalize long after their bones turned to dust. A stray olive leaf drifts across the battlement, silent as a whispered omen. You consider the irony of seeking solace on a wall built to repel hope with its sheer, unyielding stones. Each blade of grass pushing through the cracks stands as testament to life's stubborn insistence. A distant horn blasts, carrying the timbre of a warning, and the promise of swords soon ringing in chorus. You shift your weight, the bones in your feet, reminding you of each long march that brought you here. The memory of yesterday's skirmish flickers in your mind, half light and echoing with unseen spectres. You taste ash on your tongue from torches that burned too brightly as gossip smouldered in every tavern. The dawn breeze carries the tang of sweat and triumph from nearby stables, where steeds paw the marble floors. You close your eyes to steady your senses, as clarity returns with each measured breath. Crows wheel overhead like ebony sentinels on celestial currents. You recall an old joke from camp. If love could conquer, we'd all be sipping wine at a spa retreat, not besieging fortresses. The thought carries a bitter humor, a seasoning for your nerves as they knuckle in anticipation. Through the dim glow, a lone trumpet blares a call to arms, crisp and unyielding in the morning air. You steel yourself, knowing that within moments this rampart will transform from gallery to arena. The stones hum under your fingertips, vibrating with the collective intent of warriors past and present. Dew-laden gusts brush your face, each breath prickling with otherworldly charge. The horizon finally blooms into gold, a cruel jest of beauty before the madness erupts. You flex your toes against the wall's edge, feeling both tethered and afloat in this strange purgatory. A patch of sky breaks free of clouds, a fleeting promise that history seldom honors. You replay in your mind a whispered prophecy from the priests. Love will be our undoing. That prophecy now resonates as harsh reality, a jagged script you're destined to perform. You run a hand through your hair, dust and hope mingling on your fingertips. Even here you can almost detect the laugh of Paris, that prince exiled from his home, chasing a face carved of golden ivory. The faint resonance of distant drums reminds you that time marches forward whether you're ready or not. Your breath catches as the sun's first finger of light sifts through a breach in the clouds. You brace against the cool breeze again, treasuring this suspended calm before the day's clamour. The call for valor will echo soon enough, but for now the rampart is yours alone. A sharp surge of adrenaline coils in your throat, resistant to any calm. A single tear of dew slips down a cracked stone, tracing the contour of history's tears. You sense the weight of a helmet you have yet to don, cold iron promising both protection and pain. A distant dock worker heaves a crate onto a cart, his grunt a solitary percussion in this grand rehearsal. You imagine the city below, a serpentine expanse of rooftops and cobbles awaiting your descent. The very air vibrates with anticipation, carrying the fervour of a market crowd before its scandal is revealed. You close your eyes again and draw in one last deep breath of mist on stone. Each second stretches in weighted silence, the calm before the storm's advance. In this brief interlude, you are neither conqueror nor exile, but something raw and undefended. The rampart is both cradle and cage, offering a vantage point and a noose at once. The ground shifts imperceptibly beneath your feet, the stone itself humming with ancient war songs. The final sliver of night yields to dawn, and your senses sharpen to the scent of carnage yet unseen. You place a hand on the moss-veined stone and sense the pulse of centuries beneath your palm. In that heartbeat, you glimpse the fragile thread that binds love to catastrophe. You swallow hard as the chill settles into your chest, an unwelcome companion. Then you realize the moment has come. Dawn is over, and the world is awake. You step off the ramparts onto a road of baked earth so dry it cracks underfoot like shards of broken amphorae. The mid-morning sun beats down mercilessly, turning every stone and roof tile into a scorching surface. Dust coils around your ankles, the fine grit biting into your skin with each movement. In the heart of Troy, the streets radiate heat, the air heavy with shimmering distortion. You squint through haze that softens the world, drifting particles blurring distant shapes. The scent of scorched olive leaves drifts from shattered groves beyond the walls, mingling with the stench of sweat and livestock. You swallow past parched lips that crack with every movement, the air tasting of chalk and dust. Every doorway offers shadows that vanish before you reach them, promising relief that never arrives. A donkey's bray echoes off sun-wilted walls, its off-key twang reverberating through your ribcage. Loose chaff from passing carts skitters across your vision, a constant reminder of the harvest's toll. You pause by a well where water glints under the sun, imagining sweet salvation, then recoil at the thought of its brackish chill. Traders hawk ceramic amphorae of wine, their rasping calls rising like distant ritual chants. A cluster of straw mats under a tarpaulin offers scant shade. You press your palm to the cool weave and savor a momentary reprieve. Near the forum, mosaic fragments gleam beneath countless sandals, tiny kaleidoscopes half buried in dust. Flies droned around half-eaten figs, dark bodies hovering over decay as silent sentinels. Each bead of sweat trails down your brow, sizzling when it meets the sun-baked stone. A merchant coughs violently nearby, the echo carrying a metallic resonance that ripples through the stalls. You shade your eyes with your hand, yet the glare remains unyielding. You pause in the heat, letting the weight of the sun press against you before you press on. When you look again, the world feels both sharp and distant, softened by drifting incense that clings to the air. A stray dog scampers by, ribs outlined beneath mottled fur, paw prints slipping into the dust. Herders drive goats down a side alley, their bells jangling in uneven rhythms beneath the blazing sky. You stare at rolling hills shimmering in heat waves, distant slopes teasing cooler pastures that may only exist in hope. A whiff of roasted barley drifts from a makeshift stall, stirring hunger you'd rather ignore. You imagine biting into a fresh loaf, the crust cracking sharply beneath your teeth. Cartwheels creak over rough cobbles, punctuating the oppressive silence between vendors' calls. You feel heat refract off cobblestones, warping the world into wavering ripples. Stalls of faded cloth flutter under wooden awnings, their patterns blurred by sun bleach and centuries of exposure. You sip from your water skin, the tepid trickle down your throat offering muted relief. Your sandals disturb the scorched earth, sending ochre motes swirling in the sunlit air. A passing child chases a glimmering beetle, its armor reflecting the sun in tiny bursts of light. You raise an eyebrow at his carefree chase, luxury in a place where survival hangs on every step. A bronze brazier guttering with embers sputters in an abandoned courtyard, smoke curling into the sky in lazy spirals. You lean against a pillar, its grooves polished smooth by centuries of hands seeking stability. Your lungs gulp air thick with particulate, each breath tasting of every traveller who ever trod this path. A group of soldiers strides by, sandals slapping in unison, a thunderous march of impending doom. You catch a flash of polished breastplate and wonder how metal remains gleaming under the unrelenting sun. A breeze kicks up, carrying the distant roar of unseen waves that promise calm rather than relief. You close your eyes briefly, centering yourself against the city's relentless pulse. The scraped wooden sign over a wine shop creaks in protest, spelling out oinopoion in looping letters. You grin at the unfamiliar script curling across the wood, its shapes dancing beyond your grasp. A merchant peels back a canvas flap to reveal amphorae standing in silent rows, their contents awaiting water's blessing. You sense anticipation, liquid defiance against the merciless sun. Stray cats slink through shadowed alcoves, their eyes glinting with reflected light in the darkness. You picture them as silent guardians of secrets you wouldn't dare uncover. A sharp clang echoes from a nearby smithy, where a hammer strikes heated metal, a sudden reprieve in an otherwise static scene. You edge closer to watch molten bronze hiss as it meets water, steam rising like the first breath of a newborn colt. The smith wipes sweat from his brow with a leather scrap, mirroring your own desperate search for relief. You inhale soot and iron, tasting metal's sharp bite on your tongue. A stray breeze carries snatches of conversation in a language older than memory, words echoing riddles carved on temple stones. You try to catch their drift, but only realize how little you understand this world's hidden framework. You glance skyward, vultures circling high above, their flights tracing lazy arcs against the relentless blue. This sun-baked tableau might be timeless. Identical lanes, dusty and sun-scorched from Troy to Timbuktu, if not for Bronze Age scars etched in every crack. You lift a hand, shielding your eyes and feeling the heat deepen with each passing breath. A distant bell tolls somewhere in the city's heart, its deep tone reverberating through your bones. You brace yourself, anticipating the clash of arms or the stomp of marching feet soon to follow. Each breath is a negotiation between thirst and determination, a fragile truce in a city on the brink. You let out a low sigh, picturing this burning corridor as a gauntlet to be passed. Shade your only hope. You steel yourself and take another step forward, dust swirling at your heels in trailing wisps from last night's bonfire. Wooden planks of the harbour quay creaked underfoot while dusk bled across the sky, turning the water molten bronze. You see lanterns hung from masts, flickering like fireflies trapped in iron cages, their glow dancing across the rippling tide. A cool spray of salt water misted your face, droplets tracing fleeting paths across your skin. You feel your boots thud against algae-darkened planks, each impact a solemn toll echoing through the empty timbers. A lone sailor hummed a sea shanty, his gravelly melody drifting through the night air with notes both ragged and sweet. You lean over the rail and watch fish scales catch torchlight, tiny prisms shimmering beneath the waves. Burning pitch exuded a bitter tang from barrels set ablaze to ward off unwary ships. You hear flames crackling and popping, their rhythm recalling rituals performed long ago. Brine coated your tongue, a remnant of voyages that spilled souls onto these shores. You watch a gull land on a broken oar, its soot-smudged feathers holding a patient stillness. Fingertips traced the weathered rope rail, following grooves carved by countless hands before yours. You note lanterns serving as both beacons of hope and warnings, promising safe harbor while hinting at unseen dangers. Smoke and old wood mingled in the air, forming an ancient perfume that clung to the nostrils. You feel the quay's timbers sigh under your weight, as though mourning caravans long departed. A cluster of amphorae half submerged at the water's edge glinted where torchlight kissed their rims. You crouch and reach out, fingertips brushing cool ceramic while sensing the tide's gentle tremor. Market laughter echoed from a nearby wharfside stall, innocence standing in stark contrast to the night's hush. You smile briefly at that contrast, then tuck the memory away as a fragile token in your thoughts. The sharp tang of curing fish filled the air, a pungent reminder of life's daily grind. You watch a lantern's glow fracture in the water, scattering ribbons of light across the planks. Leaning against a barrel, its swollen curves pressed into the small of your back. You hear a distant chant of temple priests drifting from the city, its slow, hypnotic rhythm ebbing through the quay. That cadence washed over the scene, drawing all pulses into its measured beat. You press knuckles against a charred beam, sensing its patient pulse beneath your touch. A stray dog trotted nearby, silhouette ghostly in the torchlight before pausing to sniff a discarded cloak. You raise a brow at its brazen curiosity and offer a gentle pat as if comforting a fellow exile. Cool night air drifted in, carrying promise of relief from the day's furnace. You wrap arms around yourself, seeking refuge in the cloak's comforting folds. A nearby torch guttered, its glow stuttering before flaring once more. You watch shadows stretch and retreat across the quay, their dance a silent pantomime. The murmur of haggling voices dissolved into soft echoes, rising from distant temple halls. You let your gaze settle on lanterns afloat at the horizon, their lights outlining moored triremes. Oars cut through water in steady strokes, each movement testament to voyages past. You breathe in the scent of tar and hemp rope, sweat and timber, weaving the industry of empires. A shiver ran down your spine as you recalled legends of sea monsters lurking beneath these same waves. You remind yourself that darkness is absence of light, not always an omen of doom. Moonlight spilt through a sparse cloud, its pale beam guiding ghostly shapes across the deck. You feel lunar tides tug within your chest, each swell echoing the sea's timeless rhythm. The drip of water and creak of wood formed a harbour's chorus, anchoring all to this moment. You feel the quay speak in whispers of salt, timber, and distant thunder. Ambient shadows claimed the space, lantern flames brightening the void with silent urgency. You hear a distant horn bellow from the gate, its echo shuddering against stone walls. The cloak's folds cradled shoulders against the chill when drawn snug. You press a fingertip to your lips, recalling vows once spoken in moonlit temples. A glint of metal emerged, an anchor's curve promising weight and security. You inhale deeply, salt-laced air filling your lungs with the vigor of a king's first draught of wine. The harbour stood as cradle of beginnings and endings, where journeys converged in whispered farewells. You notice shadows gathering, a velvet curtain that swallowed sound and demanded introspection. Ancient stars shifted overhead, their beacons guiding sailors for generations. You trace Orion's belt in your mind, each star a stitch in the night's tapestry. Dust drifted down from unseen rafters, settling like a silent benediction from the sea. You watch torchlight blur at the edges, streaming in watery halos. Harbour murmurs rose in rhythm with the tide, weaving an elegy of salt and timber. You feel muscles loosen under night's cool breath, tension melting into the quay's heartbeat. Breath slowed, each inhale a gentle tide, and each exhale a retiring wave. You recall the captain's cabin forward, hammock swaying softly above the cargo hold. The vessel's gentle rocking matched the sea's undulating pulse beneath. You savor quiet that blankets the quay in amber glow and rippling shadow. This moment lingers at the cusp of dark and dawn, where every story begins. You rest your chin on your chest, listening to the harbour's final whisper before turning toward the city lights. When you cast your mind back to the windswept Aegean shores, a figure emerges from prophecy's shadow. Paris of Troy, once burdened by an ominous prediction. Abandoned at birth, he grew up far from royal comforts in the rugged mountains of Mount Ida, living like an exiled ram wandering shepherds' hills. His adoptive father, a humble shepherd, taught him to read the clouds for rain, while Paris learned to trace the scars of his own destiny in rock formations. Unlike pampered courtiers dripping with perfume, Paris had no silk pavilions, only the open sky and a lone goat for company. As an adult, he returned to Troy under the guise of a guest, slipping into the city that had unknowingly exalted the very child it once cast aside. Historians still debate whether this homecoming took the shape of an awkward family reunion or the triumphant blast of a ceremonial trumpet. By the time he reached Troy's gates, tension thrummed through the city. Hushed conversations spoke of a son destined to bring both glory and ruin. Imagine a stranger entering your village, tossing a bone into the sacred well and declaring it would seal everyone's fate. Yet Paris was greeted with open arms. King Priam, grounded in the stoic endurance of the ancient olive groves, enfolded Paris in a prodigal shepherd's embrace, heedless of the old divinations. For a fleeting moment, prophecy seemed nothing more than a dusty tale, easily drowned by wine cups and laughter. Yet at every feast, Paris sat cloaked in unspoken guilt, a dark presence at the table. His title of prince weighed on him with the constriction of iron bracelets fashioned for another man's wrists. The court bards recited his story with lilting verses, reminding all that fate was neither pastime nor parable, but a relentless companion. Paris carried himself with the measured dignity of a reluctant tragedian bound to perform a sorrowful script. He wore fine robes that shimmered in torchlight, though he secretly kept the coarse wool tunic of his youth tucked beneath, a quiet rebellion against expectation. Even the statues in the Temple of Apollo seemed to murmur among themselves, wondering if exile had honed Paris's steel or simply sharpened old wounds. Rumour held that whenever prophecy was uttered, Paris cracked a knowing grin, his expression tracing hidden lines carved deep in sacred stone. On the eve of a grand ceremony, he stood alone by the walls, tracing ancient inscriptions that warned of doom, their letters flickering within torchlight's glow, steadfast sentinels in the dark. There, under a moon veiled in ghostly pallor, he pondered whether destiny was etched in marble or sketched in loose sand. Scholars later noted his brooding silhouette, a lone watchman forever scanning the horizon for approaching sails. The prophecy, delivered by a seer whose foresight rivaled a farmer's most treasured almanac, declared that Paris would sway Troy's fate with a single choice. He became the kingdom's unsuspected catalyst, crowned not by birthright alone, but by the promise of what might yet unfold. As drums echoed through palace corridors, Paris felt expectation pressed against his chest, a slab of marble crushing his breath. He recalled the cottage hearths of his childhood, where anxieties were measured by the fullness of granaries, not by cryptic verses in flowing robes. At dawn, he would stand before 3 goddesses, vying for the title of most desirable. No spectacle more absurd in any land. Think of a contest where priestesses offer you goblets of consecrated wine, a golden laurel, and a swift chariot drawn by stallions. Temptations fit for a mortal. Only here the prize was not a crown, but a pact that could unravel kingdoms. Hecuba, his mother, watched from the palace steps, her eyes clouded with hope and dread in equal measure. She had endured so many prophecies that Troy seemed to her a garden sown with seeds of sorrow. The herald's trumpet cut through the morning haze, declaring that Paris's moment had arrived. He stepped into the temple courtyard, marble columns standing as silent jury members carved by ancient hands. Before him stood the 3 goddesses, Hera, regal and imperious, Athena, clad in warlike armor, and Aphrodite, radiant with beguiling charm. They each offered Paris gifts swathed in veiled promises, sovereignty, victory, and the love of the loveliest mortal. In that instant, the city fell silent, caught in a pantomime beneath watchful stars. Paris's heart thundered, not with desire, but at the gravity of choosing among divine pledges. Hera seduced him with dominion over distant lands, a promise of realms at his command. Athena tempted him with strategic genius, offering wisdom sharpened by the keen eye of a hawk. Aphrodite spoke of Helen, a mortal whose beauty outshone even moonlit murals. As Aphrodite spoke, Paris felt a thrill ripple through him, stirring a hunger he had never known. He looked to Hera, imagining endless power yet sensing a frost within his bones. Athena's offer glinted with tactical excellence, yet he envisioned fields littered with broken shields and mournful dirges. Then Aphrodite unveiled a vision of Troy's gates embracing a bride whose face rivaled the morning sun. That single image, imbued with the force of a sacred incantation, banished caution and reason. Paris stretched forth his hand to accept a ceremonial wreath and pronounced the fateful name Aphrodite. In that moment, the die was cast, and war loomed inevitable across the coming dawn. Quiet ripples of his decision lapped through marble halls, leaving courtiers hushed and scribes racing to inscribe every word. The seers of Troy declared that by his choice, the city embraced its darkest destiny in a single whisper. Paris, staring into a flickering bronze brazier, felt triumph sour beneath the weight of what lay ahead. He grasped that prophecy was less a script to recite and more a relentless hourglass slowly draining. Later tales would frame this as romantic folly, but none recalled the dread that coiled beneath his vow. In truth, Paris's choice unwove a tapestry of alliances and blood oaths long neglected. It stirred ancient grudges in Mycenae and Sparta, fanning embers of resentment into flame. Warriors sharpened blades and queens sharpened tongues, all because one exile dared desire. The air around Troy quivered with murmurs of conflict, a distant drum roll at twilight. Traders paused their caravans, sensing the shift in the air that preceded tempests. By sunset, Paris stood once more on the ramparts, where he first glimpsed Troy's future etched in smoke and flame. He pondered whether destiny was a gift or a chain, perhaps both intertwined in braided form. The night wind carried promises of ecstasy and ruin, weaving mockery into his mortal longing. So, in the hush before midnight, Troy steadied itself for war born of love and thunder. Paris, once overlooked in exile, now wielded power fierce enough to topple empires or craft legends anew. His name would echo through ages, its resonance forever split between devotion and devastation. In prophecy's shadow, he walked a path neither divine nor wholly mortal, a tightrope stretched above fate's abyss. And in those hidden corridors of destiny, Paris realized that princely privilege bore peril's sharpest edge. Ahead lay thousands of ships, armies, and lives bound to the will of one solitary man. The world beyond Troy's walls shifted in measured grains, ready to bury kingdoms in its drift. Yet even as doom gathered, Paris dared to dream of a love that might outshine every oracle's decree. It was a gamble worthy of tragedy, a cautionary tale woven into history's tapestry. When Troy's banners rose at dawn, they would bear the mark of his choice, blood-red with both passion and peril. And in that cruel arena of war, the boy once hidden among sheep had become its most formidable actor. This is the story of a prince whose exile shaped his fate and whose longing ignited a 1,000-year saga. Though centuries have faded, you can still feel that decisions echo whispering through the halls of time. It stands testament to the heart's power to both shatter worlds and kindle immortal myth, leaving one to wonder, did that golden guest in Spartan halls further fan these flames of fate? Paris enters the Spartan Megaron with measured grace, his robe woven from Troy's finest silk, glinting like a coronation robe in a priestly procession. In Lacedaemon, the city's martial reputation stands as unwavering as carved granite. The throne room's heavy beams loom overhead like the ribs of a fallen behemoth, and the air carries faint notes of roasting goat and disciplined purpose. King Menelaus, Sparta's austere host, greets Paris with a nod steady as a shield wall, weighing his arrival like a seasoned commander. Around them, Spartan nobles sit on backless stools, their posture as rigid as hoplite formation. Paris inclines his head in thanks, his bow deep enough to honor custom yet light as a reed in a temple breeze. Lanterns flicker against carved stone walls depicting phalanxes of warriors, units whose unity would shame scattering tribes. A herald proclaims the feast, and servers enter bearing platters heaped with figs, barley bread, and spit-roasted lamb. The aroma lays a rich tapestry in the air, intoxicating as any Dionysian rite. Paris settles onto a low bench, crossing his legs with the poise of a guest in a temple of gods. Across the hall, Helen of Sparta steps forward, her beauty spoken of in hushed reverence, rivaling the dawn's first light. In this moment, Paris feels transported to a divine festival, a sacred pageant of fates entwined. Menelaus raises a goblet dark with wine, a silent toast to alliances forged in both blood and word. Paris tastes the vintage, its depth rich with the promise of secrets whispered in candlelit halls. Servers move silently, refilling cups with the precision of temple acolytes tending sacred vessels. Helen offers Paris a gentle smile, her gaze as calculating as any queen surveying her city's fate. He notes that her gown gleams beneath torchlight, threads weaving patterns like constellations on a night sky. Musicians strike a lyre refrain, each note pulsing like distant war drums held at bay for this solemn gathering. Paris listens, his thoughts drifting to Troy's gates where harpists once played for his childhood hearth. Despite the court's splendor, an undercurrent of tension ripples through the hall like wind through reeds before a storm. Menelaus clears his throat and steers the talk toward Paris's proposed union. Helen's hand in marriage, the offer, cloaked in courtesy, bears the weight of strategy more than sentiment. Paris replies with measured eloquence, praising Sparta's valor as if reciting sacred hymns. Every phrase cuts as sharply as a spear's point, for in Sparta, words can wound as surely as steel. Helen listens, her expression a tapestry of curiosity and guarded resolve. The dialogue shifts from ceremony to politics, touching on Mycenaean tensions and Troy's grain routes. Paris suggests mutual grain shipments and shared defenses, the pillars of a lasting accord. Menelaus inclines his head, assessing each proposal as though mapping battle lines on a clay tablet. Beneath a tapestry of crimson, Spartan youths drill in the courtyard, their spears rising and falling in disciplined harmony. Paris watches through a latticed window, recalling Troy's walls echoing similar drills. The feast resumes with honey cakes, each bite a decadent blessing from the earth. Helen offers Paris a morsel, her gesture both sincere and subtle as an offering at an altar. He accepts, savoring sweetness that briefly masks his caution. As conversation deepens, Paris reclines, commending Sparta's resilience in tones worthy of an epic bard. Menelaus counters with tales of recent skirmishes repelled along the Eurotas, his pride as steadfast as the city's ramparts. Paris applauds him, aware that in this hall, praise is currency as valuable as forged bronze. Torchlight casts Menelaus's features into relief, revealing lines like chiseled stone. Helen sips her wine, each drop slipping past her lips with the deliberation of a priestess pouring libations. Paris marvels at her composure, an art of restraint worthy of Athena herself. Suddenly, a messenger arrives bearing word that Spartan scouts have been seen near the Scamander. The hall stills as the news spreads, earlier gaiety vanishing like mist under the sun's glare. Menelaus's jaw tightens. Paris senses the change as a prelude to thunder. Helen's gaze drifts to the gates, her eyes reflecting concern deeper than any chasm. Paris rises, resolve hardening like tempered iron, ready to advise Menelaus in counsel and action. Servers clear vessels and plates, their movements swift as shadows at dusk. Paris stands beside Helen, their shoulders aligning as allies against the gathering storm. Outside, Spartan warriors arm themselves, armor glinting beneath torch fires like watchful sentinels. The messenger's words seal the fragile pact. Marriage talks will wait as war clouds gather. Paris bows to Menelaus, shared defense pledged in the silence between them. Helen offers a final look, both farewell and promise, as a herald to what's to come. The night air carries distant echoes of hammer on anvil, the smith forging weapons for the days ahead. Paris steps onto the palace steps, catching fragments of stirring ranks assembled beneath the walls. He realizes that here, alliances are forged not just in velvet halls but on fields of strife. Menelaus clasps Paris's arm in solidarity, the grip firm as bronze bound to bronze. Together, they stride toward stables where steeds await, silhouettes framed by flickering flame. Paris glances back at the Megaron, wondering if Helen's warmth will endure the coming siege. Soon that question will echo across battle lines louder than any trumpet blast. As they mount, Paris feels the weight of new duties settle upon him. Diplomat turned commander. Sparta's hilts and shields catch the first light of dawn, a crimson tapestry heralding fate's swift march. In the chill of night, Paris senses desire and duty entwined, a storm forged in heart and spear. He urges his horse onward, disappearing into darkness where alliances will be tested in blood and breath. Tonight, the Golden Guest takes helm as general, tasked with defending the fragile promise of a union born of strategy and longing. Somewhere amid these hushed steps, the ghost of prophecy smiles at the price each choice must pay. Within days of Paris's departure from Lacedaemon, ships thrummed with the urgency of war drums, setting sail for Troy at dawn. The date hovers around 1193 BCE, when galleys cut through the Aegean like steel knives through parchment. Paris arrives with Helen at Troy's harbour, their vessels gliding amid gull cries and reluctant farewells. As they disembark, Paris feels every cheering chant pulse through his ribs like the toll of village bells at harvest. Helen steps onto the wooden planks with poise that could headline the most exclusive temple festival. Citizens line the docks, eyes wide with excitement and something darker, anticipation of conflict. Beyond the crowd, storm clouds gather on the horizon, not in weather vanes but in the tense atmosphere. Paris offers his arm to Helen, and together they walk toward the city gates, greeted by trumpets that warn both celebration and danger. King Priam, draped in regal violet, welcomes his daughter-in-law with arms that conceal creeping dread. He murmurs a prayer to Zeus, hoping his city can withstand this new alliance. Meanwhile, the council chambers buzz with debate. Should Troy seek peace or prepare for blades? Senators argue as fiercely as gladiators under the sun, each voice a sharpened blade of rhetoric. Paris insists on solemnizing the union with a lavish ceremony, believing its spectacle might temper hostility. Helen, aware that even the finest ceremony can't polish away broken promises, stands composed beside him. The ceremony transforms the palace courtyard into an opulent hall, torches flickering against marble like theatrical spotlights. Priests chant hymns to Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite in rotating verses, a triage of divine endorsements. Every syllable rings through the open sky, stitched into the afternoon breeze that still tastes of dusty stone and tension. When the vows are exchanged, Paris swears to honor Helen above all, and few things unleash mortal gods' jealousy faster than that. Helen's voice carries calmly, her words measured like reciting sacred vows in a temple's hush. Bystanders gasp at the romantic promise, unaware that their whispered cheers will soon give way to shrieks of war sirens. Later, as feasting resumes, Paris tries to lighten the mood with jests comparing Trojan wines to Lacedaemonian barley beer. His humor crashes like an unstrung lyre. Helen watches, offering polite smiles, though her thoughts drift to the distant thrum of Spartan archers on the evening breeze. Before the banquet's end, a messenger collapses at Paris's feet, bearing sealed scrolls from Sparta. The crimson horsehead seal betrays a declaration that Helen must return at once, or face Spartan wrath. The hall falls still. On one side, duty to family, on the other, duty to love. Paris breaks the stillness, tearing the scroll open like ripping off a bandage before it hurts more. He reads Menelaus's ultimatum aloud. Helen's fleeting marriage is betrayal and demands restitution in blood. Priam steps forward, promising to mediate peace, though he knows Spartan pride cuts deeper than bronze swords. Paris slams his fist on the table, rattling goblets and silencing chatter. He vows that Troy will not hand over Helen, equating her worth to all the city's treasures combined. Helen's gaze shifts to the sculpted friezes above, their carved figures exemplifying both divine beauty and destructive wrath. A sense of foreboding wraps the courtyard like a funeral shroud, and Paris realizes their wedding ring glints like an unbreakable contract. That night, he stands atop the ramparts, listening to distant horns, ancient war sirens announcing Sparta's mobilization. Clay rooftops glow beneath torchlight, each tile a witness to the avalanche triggered by a single vow. Messages fly between Troy and its allies, Mycenae, Thebes, Phthia, like swift couriers on sunlit pathways. Paris convenes with his brother Hector, whose calm counsel contrasts Paris's fiery resolve. Hector urges caution, reminding Paris that Sparta's might could level cities faster than alliances form. Paris counters that without honor, love is a phantom. Without loyalty, kingdoms crumble like ancient walls. He speaks of Helen as more than a prize, insisting her agency transcends politics, though scribes often forget to record her voice. Helen herself joins the war council, her presence disarming both generals and scribes. She argues for peace, noting that no victor truly wins when the spoils are human lives. Some advisors scoff, likening her words to a lullaby in a forge, soothing but fruitless. Helen's calm retort silences critics. She reminds them that Sparta and Troy once traded grain and gold, not spears and shields. Paris places a hand atop hers, solidarity shining through like sunlight piercing storm clouds. Yet shadows lengthen on the discussion table, carved with symbols of past wars and broken truces. Reports arrive of Spartan warships sighted off the Lycian coast, armadas bristling with hoplites and intent. Paris dispatches envoys to Nafplio, seeking reinforcements and reminding Greece that Troy's stability fuels their commerce. Days pass in a whirlwind, spear sharpening, wall fortification, prayers offered in every temple. Soldiers train under Phoenician mercenaries, battle-hardened fighters for hire, whose loyalty matches their coin. Helen visits the armory, watching craftsmen forge arrowheads that glint like starlight against anvil sparks. She selects a helmet for Paris, etching inside the words, "In love and war, stand firm." Paris dons the helmet at dawn, its bronze crest gleaming under the rising sun. Their eyes meet across the courtyard, recalling promises sworn beneath kinder skies. The gates open to admit allies, banners bearing strange heraldry, falcons, boars, triple spirals. Paris leads a procession to the Scamander River, addressing troops arrayed before the water's gentle flow. He speaks of honor, love, and home, his voice carrying over soldiers as if borne on the wind of war horns. The warriors cheer, their shouts echoing off stone like a chorus in a grand theatre. Yet beyond the cheers lies a question no one asks. Will love endure when steel and flame take center stage? At twilight, Helen prays at Aphrodite's temple, her whispered pleas mingling with incense smoke. Outside, the wind carries the clash of swords from a training yard, a dissonant hymn for restless nights. Paris steps into the dim corridor leading to their chamber, feeling the weight of his choices and Helen's warmth. The torches dim as they enter, shadows pooling like spilled ink on parchment. In the hush, Paris recalls the prophecy that once foretold Troy's doom, now unfolding as a saga of human passion. Helen lays her hand on his cheek, grounding him in the present even as the future trembles. They share a silent vow, no swords drawn, only hearts entwined against destiny's tide. Outside their chamber, the city sleeps uneasily, dreams haunted by visions of burning temples and fallen walls. Somewhere amid those slumbering streets, war sirens wail once more, summoning all to the inevitable clash. In the shadowy vaults of modern archaeology, weathered shards of clay tablets whisper secrets from the late Bronze Age. Buried beneath the ruins of Troy, these fragments bear fleeting traces of a civilization teetering on collapse. Imagine uniting mosaic fragments where entire tesserae are lost, and the image is inscribed in a tongue nearly swallowed by time. Along the rugged coast of Anatolia, faint impressions of linear B script hint at trade agreements, palace inventories, and perhaps a scandalous love affair. Scholars comb through lines etched in damp clay, hunting for clues about Helen's famed beauty and Paris's fateful decision. Each fractured edge might signal the shift between routine tax tallies and secret missives slipped beneath palace doors. They reveal the palace clerk's confidential entries, half hidden and demanding patience to decipher. In a torchlit chamber today, scholars lean over polished amber lenses, coaxing out syllables that once echoed through marble halls. One fragment mentions precious oils, which could refer to Helen's elaborate cosmetics or tribute payments from far-flung allies. Another shard lists grain rations, perhaps the same olives and barley that fueled chariot races at dawn. When Paris absconded with Helen, did he pause at the scribe's desk to reassign barley quotas? These tablets may hold the answer. Under amber-lit lenses, scholars discern erased strokes, Scribe A expunging Scribe B's notes, betraying a rivalry in the palace archives. It records discord in cold clay, where every erased mark could have shifted the course of policy. One amused scribe chuckles at centuries-old cryptic tallies, marveling at how these clerical jots survived millennia. These tablets rarely offer a complete narrative. Instead, they scatter tantalizing leads of palace intrigue and mounting tensions. When famine struck the coastline, scribes recorded barley transfers to appease hungry soldiers, an act that may explain shifting loyalties. If Helen's departure triggered a supply convoy's collapse, these clay records would bear the fingerprints of panic and profiteering. Beyond dry tallies, some fragments bear coded references to rituals invoking Aphrodite's favor, a devotional murmur beneath Trojan ramparts. One inscription calls for wine and oil beneath moonlit columns, hinting at secret ceremonies that mingled devotion with desire. That detail deepens the scene, suggesting a romance woven of ritual and scandal. Piecing together these shards demands cross-referencing Hittite archives, Mycenaean clay records, and Egyptian letters from Amarna. When a Hittite envoy grumbles about troublesome baggage at the port, they might be alluding to Trojan exiles and their silver spoils. This cross-cultural sleuthing reveals how Helen's beauty and Paris's defiance sent ripples across empires, carried by envoys and couriers. It's astonishing that after 3,200 years, we still decode the petty details that stoked Achilles' rage and summoned fleets to foreign shores. Each tiny syllable emerges as evidence in a vast, submerged narrative. Some fragments list payments to jewelers, forging diadems, perhaps the very pieces that captivated Paris at first sight. If only those sparks of passion were as plainly documented as the copper consignments bound for Mycenae. Instead, lovers' pledges hide behind columns of numbers and cryptic references to the Golden One. In a dim scriptorium by lamplit hearths, scholars craft wax impressions to reunite shards in living relief. This art revives broken pottery, allowing researchers to join fragments with careful precision. A near-complete fragment reveals a ceremonial feast, listing roasted lamb, honey cakes, and imported figs, echoes of the Iliad's banquets. The more intact a tablet appears, the clearer the glimpse of palace opulence and the pressures that fueled courtly ambitions. Yet the voids between lines are where theories flourish, as varied as whispered rumours in the agora. Did a scribe omit Helen's name to avoid political fallout? Or did administrators simply prioritize grain tallies over romance? Scholars debate these possibilities over horns of spiced wine, chuckling at how little some bureaucratic habits change. Discovering the phrase, "for the Queen's favour," on a shard sends tremors through academic circles. Was that Queen Helen, or another royal entirely? In this cultural deep dive, every minor phrase can rewrite our understanding of why war engulfed the Eastern Mediterranean. It's a lesson in cautious celebration. Exult at a newly deciphered word, then brace for reclassification by a peer reviewer. Gazing at these fragments, it's hard not to feel empathy for ancient scribes whose errors became millennia-old mysteries. Their scratched-out glyphs and hurried reinscriptions remind us that even Bronze Age bureaucracies were prone to slipshod mistakes. Yet these human imperfections enliven our narrative, proving that history is a tangled tapestry woven by fallible hands. As you draw near, you might nearly scent the earth dust and resinous ink rising from an Ottoman storeroom. The clash of ledger-keeping and impassioned defiance reveals how love unraveled alliances. These broken lines, revived through patient scholarship, transform inert pottery into living testimony of desire's power. With each deciphered fragment, the saga of Paris and Helen regains depth, reminding us that empires can hinge on personal choices. Though the tablets remain silent on the lovers' final fate, they speak volumes about the cultural currents that propelled armies to foreign shores. In the interplay of commerce, diplomacy, and clandestine worship, clay shards become relics of a world on the brink. Their fractured surfaces invite us to ponder how fragile human commitments could sway the course of history. Allow the flicker of torchlight to guide your imagination toward unwritten legends. Let these clay whispers nestle in your mind, so that at dawn your thoughts brim with their silent stories, ready to unearth deeper mysteries. In a hidden chamber beneath Trojan hilltops, priestesses once whispered prayers to a goddess whose name danced on the edge of myth. Archaeologists date these rituals to roughly 1200 BCE, at a time when divine favor could tip the balance between peace and war. Imagine flickering oil lamps casting elongated shadows on frescoed walls, where painted silhouettes trace the shape of a divine embrace. Hymns to the love deity were inscribed on delicate papyrus scrolls, and occasionally on potsherds repurposed for clandestine rites. One fragment begins with an invocation, "O Radiant One, grant us the courage to follow our hearts beyond palace gates." It resembles a curated collection of mournful odes, recited in moonlit cloisters to cloaked initiates. The melody, long lost, survives only in references by Greek poets centuries later, like reconstructing a tune from a scribe's brief note scrawled on a wax tablet. Ritual participants donned wreaths woven from oleander and myrtle, plants believed to bind souls in eternal longing. Men and women alike left offerings of honeyed wine and rose petals, an act reminiscent of presenting laurel crowns before grateful spectators. A solitary stone altar bears scorch marks from burned incense, evoking a haze worthy of a sanctified grove after votive fires. Graffiti-like scratches in the temple's antechamber refer to the unseen bridegroom and hint at clandestine unions under moonlight. Scholars liken these ceremonies to secret cult gatherings in twilight groves, where melody and longing converged beneath starlit skies. In one inscription, a novice boasts, "I have tasted ambrosia beneath her gaze and felt my heart in revolt." That defiance recalls whispered declarations smuggled in scrolls sealed with wax. Excavators uncovered bronze mirrors inscribed with invocation formulas, tools for divination and vanity alike. Each reflective surface was believed to reveal the goddess's countenance if gazed upon at the correct lunar phase. Picture gazing into a burnished bronze mirror by torchlight, half expecting to glimpse Helen's reflection in the flicker. The ritual sequence prescribed 3 chants in a minor key, followed by silent vigil to hear her soft sighs. This interplay of melody and hush recalls the ancient practice of silent vigil, where hearts are tuned to the slightest echo. But here, the stakes were mortal. Devotees sought divine counsel on matters of loyalty, marriage, and the boundaries of desire. A Hittite letter references fanatical worship in Troy, suggesting these hymns drew attention and suspicion from neighboring courts. Rival kingdoms viewed the cult as both alluring and dangerous, like a migrating caravan that carried both exotic goods and unsettling rumors. Contemporary historians argue that the goddess's cult may have inspired Helen's own allure, divine patronage woven into courtly propaganda long before regal reputations took flight. One late fragment even mentions burnished crowns of night, an enigmatic phrase that could symbolize hidden commitments or political pacts. In Troy's final days, desperate initiates are said to have performed midnight processions along the city walls, chanting for mercy or vengeance. Roman-era scribes later derided these rituals as ungodly, but pollen analysis confirms the use of native herbs in sacrificial libations. That botanical evidence ties the cult's practices to local traditions rather than exotic imports, an early example of adaptation rather than mere importation of foreign rites. Some commentators suggest these ceremonies served as informal matchmaking events, akin to ritual gatherings where hopeful hearts exchanged tokens beneath candlelit arches. Attendees exchanged tokens, sometimes a lock of hair, sometimes a carved figurine, sealed with prayer for lifelong devotion. In one site, archaeologists found dozens of folded clay plaques bearing love verses, like ancient Valentine's cards pressed into the earth. These devotees etched declarations of passion into imperishable clay, ensuring their vows outlasted mortal lifespans. The intertwining of the sacred and the sensual reflected a worldview where the boundary between mortal love and divine affection blurred. Initiation rites began at dusk and lasted until dawn, culminating in a silent vow taken beneath a sky thick with stars. That vigil resembles ancient nocturnal rites, where devotees journeyed under constellations in search of transcendence. A surviving chant fragment translates to "Bind me to her soul, even if the world crumbles around us," a line worthy of an epic troubadour's lament. These hymns likely fueled popular rumor, morphing over generations into the legends we now call the Iliad. As you listen, picture those voices rising in unison, hands clasped, as dawn's first light gilded the sea beyond the walls. The raw emotion in those veiled hymns reminds us why love can be a catalyst for both creation and destruction. Viewed through antiquity's gaze, this cult blends sacred theatre and shadowed society, its reverberations felt in every whispered courtship tale. When researchers intone reconstructed verses in vaulted halls, listeners report shivers, proof that some melodies defy the ages. Archaeology may fill in many blanks, but the heart of the ritual remains inscrutable, preserved only in the hush between notes. These veiled hymns offer a glimpse into how an empire's fate could hinge on the power of a single, haunting refrain. They remind us that devotion, whether to gods or to lovers, often defies reason and upends order. And centuries later, the echo of those secret psalms stirs longing in any heart attuned to whispered vows. Beneath the sun-baked hills of Hisarlik, subtle depressions in the earth hint at chambers once roofed with great wooden beams. Archaeologists peel back layers of packed earth like unrolling a scroll sealed for centuries. Each trowel scrape reveals artifacts that challenge our tidy narratives of war and romance. A chipped amphora neck emerges, its painted frieze recalling faded tapestries of royal feasts. Further down, clusters of carnelian and glass beads suggest adornments worn by Trojan courtiers at nocturnal ceremonies. One fragment bears a faint handprint, perhaps a young scribe's imprint left in haste. Grave goods in a collapsed corridor include bronze arrowheads and iron daggers, calling attention to the city's martial craftsmanship. But these weapons lie alongside delicate jewelry, testifying that those who bore arms also fastened diadems. In a side chamber, piles of ash and scattered metal trinkets mark ritual deposits, like offerings tossed into a sacred well. Carbon dating places these deposits around 1190 BCE, mere decades before the legendary siege. Beneath a fallen lintel, fragments of ivory combs and bone pins speak to personal grooming rites, an echo of courtly elegance. A nearby pit yielded charred palm fronds and incense burners, hinting at fragrant smoke curling through stone corridors. The arrangement of pillars suggests a ceremonial procession befitting royal tribute. These chambers may have sheltered lovers, whispering pledges away from prying eyes when storm clouds rolled across the sky. Traces of carefully laid masonry form geometric patterns, hinting at planned architecture now lost to time. In a sealed niche, stylized tokens, miniature shields and discs, lay as votive offerings to deities of love and war. A broken figurine of a woman with outstretched arms evokes a local fertility goddess, merging erotic devotion with hopes for the harvest. That symbolism shows how intertwined daily survival and passionate worship were in Bronze Age societies. Nearby, a stone basin stained with red ochre and wine residue suggests libations poured for divine spectators. Soil samples reveal barley pollen, a reminder that these rites took place alongside grain harvests and military musters. One cryptic graffito etched on a wall reads, "She who binds hearts also unbinds empires," an axiom both poignant and ominous. Not far from that inscription, bits of gold leaf cling to rubble, hinting at once opulent murals reduced to mere shimmer. When conservators apply gentle solvents, they uncover faint outlines of laurel wreaths and crescent moons, a palimpsest of celestial devotion. In the shadowed alcove, corkscrew-like rat droppings remind us how even pests coexisted alongside priests and poets. Those humble remains tell tales of diet, settlement patterns, and seasonal occupancy. Fragmented seals carved with heraldic motifs may represent palace officials who sanctioned clandestine meetings. Matching those motifs to Linear B records, suggests a chain of command stretching from Mycenae to Troy. It is bureaucracy, cloaked in secrecy, communicated through hushed clay directives. Unexpectedly, pollen analysis uncovers cedar grains, wood reserved for high-status ships, within the offering pits. This hint points to maritime ties and the flow of luxury goods fueling both devotion and diplomacy. A collapsed hearth yields charred barley kernels and olive pits, a time capsule of ritual feasts. They recall communal meals meant to seal alliances through shared bread and wine. One amphora shard bears soot patterns mirroring symbols on a ceremonial shield unearthed on Lemnos. That correlation reveals networked worship spanning the Aegean like a caravan route along ancient roads. Researchers compare Trojan deposits with Hittite altars at Hattusa, uncovering a religious dialogue that transcended borders. These buried secrets emphasize how devotion, diplomacy, and desire coexisted beneath Trojan mounds. They show that the same rites fueling divine favor could also fan the embers of conflict when rival armies marched. As twilight shadows shift across stone thresholds, one senses the hush of hidden vows sealed long ago. Under flickering torchlight, a whole lamb rotates slowly on a bronze spit, its skin crackling like coarse parchment over roaring embers. The aroma of seared fat and rosemary drifts between columns wrapped in crimson silks, suffusing the hall with a heady warmth. Courtiers lean forward on cushioned benches to catch the first sizzling drips, eager as social media influencers hunting the perfect food shot. Outside, a cypress-scented breeze drifts through open arches, whispering of cedar forests inland and sea-swept horizons beyond, reminding all that Troy's grandeur perches on the threshold of legend. This feast unfolds in the grand courtyard of King Priam's palace, where every morsel feels like a statement of power. Servants scurry in linen tunics, plates gleaming with fresh figs and olives, their footsteps echoing like a restless heartbeat. A chorus of lute strings hums beneath laughter, weaving a lively antiphon into the tapestry of revelry. Drummers pound shallow bronze bowls, their rhythms as exhilarating as war drums heralding victory. Paris reclines on ornate cushions, adjusting his golden laurel wreath as if readying himself for a triumphal procession. Helen glides through the crowd, her silken robes whispering against marble floors, each step measured and hypnotic. They exchange a glance over the firelit table, a private joke, because nothing says romance like conspiring over charred meat. The lamb's juices caramelize and drip, sparking tiny flares that dance like fireflies caught in a night sky. Guests raise their cups filled with honeyed wine, toasting to glory and immortality, blissfully unaware of the chaos brewing beyond these walls. Each bite dissolves into layers of smoky tenderness, more decadent than the lavish feasts of the Olympic Games. Plates are piled high, challenging the limits of mortal appetite beyond the excesses of ritual banquets. Minstrels ebb and flow through the tables, their songs weaving tales of distant battles and doomed deities. Swaying silhouettes animate the reliefs on the walls, making carved heroes and monsters seem momentarily alive. A trader from Mycenae remarks on the spices, fenugreek and cumin, imported at great risk through war-torn corridors. His words hang in the air like a question. Was this feast worth the price paid by farmers back home? Peals of laughter ring out when a nobleman noisily devours a hunk of lamb, sending stray crumbs skittering across the mosaic floor. Somewhere above, the full moon glows through open arches, casting silver stripes that dance across the silk draperies. The pale lunar light reminds all that these nights are as transient as omens carved upon fragile oracle bones. Paris lifts a slice of lamb to his lips, savouring the crisp crust before he remembers that promises can crack just as easily. Helen's eyes flick to the scent-laden air, where the promise of eternal love mingles dangerously with undertones of betrayal. Nearby, a sculptor sketches in charcoal, capturing the indulgence as if it were the final portrait of a dying age. Servants refill goblets as guests murmur about alliances forged over roasted lamb rather than treaties scrawled on papyrus. In this gilded moment, the world outside waits, swords poised, and fortunes hanging by a greasy thread. A stray ember falls onto the silk, hissing softly as it burns, an omen no one dares interpret. Conversations shift from playful banter to hushed whispers of fate, recalling that no empire survives on feasts alone. They say the gods once dined on ambrosia, but here on mortal tables, royalty feasts on flesh and folly. Each aromatic cloud carries a reminder. Abundance breeds complacency, and complacency invites downfall. There is a strange comfort in this sensual overindulgence, like draping oneself in a lion's pelt before the hunt. A gentle hush falls as the lamb is finally carved, the hall leaning in, savouring the last crackle of bone. For a moment, time stands still, only the rich taste of lamb and secrets unspoken. And then, as the final slice slides away, the true feast begins, the unravelling of hearts and kingdoms alike. Paris steps through an arched doorway into a marble-lined chamber where gilded reliefs shimmer beneath drifting veils of steam. The walls are etched with scenes of past victories, their grooves catching droplets that glimmer like tiny suns. In Troy, royalty trades battle scars for luxuriant suds, an indulgence worthy of Aphrodite's own pampering. A shallow pool of golden water stretches beneath a vaulted ceiling carved with sea serpents, each scale dusted with saffron threads. Servants pour oil infused with crushed petals into the basin, watching it swirl in amber ribbons. Helen kneels on a polished stone bench, her robes folded neatly beside her like an afterthought. She sinks into the warm liquid, sending ripples that echo softly against the walls. The saffron releases a mellow aroma that clings to skin like a memory you can't quite place. A harpist in the corner plucks gentle chords, weaving a tranquil aria that settles like dusk over a weary heart. Paris follows, shrugging off his cloak and wading in, muscles relaxing under the fragrant haze. He leans back, eyes half closed, as if testing whether calm can actually exist in a world built on fury. Pillars rise around them, each hewn from stone so smooth it feels like glass under fingertips. Their reflections dance across the water's surface, warped by gentle waves into living frescoes. A carved dolphin head spouts a thin stream of water, its laughter silent but somehow mocking. Between sighs, Helen traces the patterns on the marble floor, wondering if these motifs once foretold her fate. The bath's heat seeps into bones, loosening the tension knotted there like stubborn weeds. Nearby, a bronze brazier crackles, keeping the air thick with warmth and the faint taste of charcoal. Paris scoops water into a clay bowl and pours it over his shoulders, sending globs of oil tumbling into the pool. The scent intensifies, clinging to linen and leather like a permanent reminder of indulgence. She watches the saffron filaments floating by her ankles, tiny beacons in a sea of opulence. Outside, gulls cry in the distance, their calls muted by stone but present enough to hint at the city beyond. It's a world away from the clamour of war. Here, every drop of water feels like a stolen secret. Helen leans forward, pressing her palms flat against the cool edge of the basin, and thinks of prophecies written in half-forgotten temples. Paris smiles wryly, remarking that nothing so fragrant could ever stink of surrender. A servant enters with a wooden chest of ointments, each jar topped with a curling filigree that glints in the steam. Helen selects a pomade scented with cedar and honey, rubbing it into her arms until they gleam. Paris tests a dab behind his ear, then hums in approval, a gesture befitting a king's seal of favor. They move slowly, as if time itself has softened to match the pace of their limbs in water. Above them, the ceiling's carvings drip intermittently, each drop plinking into the pool like punctuation. Feels like bathing in pure sunset. Paris muses, voice hushed enough to sound confidential. Helen laughs softly, noting that emperors in other lands might kill for a view like this. The saffron tints their skin with a faint gold, turning every gasp of breath into a whispered hymn of opulence. As they recline, steam curls around them, obscuring the space between flesh and fantasy. In this chamber, carved by master artisans, worries dissolve faster than sugar in honeyed tea. But even here, beneath layers of comfort, an undertow of dread lingers, because every palace bath must end, and reality always waits in the wings. Paris rises, water cascading off him in droplets like morning dew on temple columns, each shimmering in the low light like fragments of a forgotten dream. Helen follows, each movement deliberate, savouring the final caress of warmth before the cold air outside snaps them back to life. They cloak themselves in plush linen wraps, the last steam drifting off their skin like the tail of a comet. For a moment they share a look that says, "This is the best part of being human." Yet as they exit into torchlit corridors, the scent of saffron clings to their memory, reminding them that beauty can be both balm and trap. A gust of wind rattles arrow slits high above the throne room, carrying the scent of imminent danger. At the center of a marble dais, a jeweler's chest spills open, each diadem more dazzling than the last. Gold filigree twists like wildfire across the bands, studded with garnets bright as fresh wounds. Crystal tears hang from their arches, shimmering like dewdrops on a dawn-lit altar. Princess Cassandra surveys the treasures with a hush that feels louder than any trumpet blast. This spectacle unfolds beneath a domed ceiling painted with star spirits in the walls of Troy. Banners embroidered with dusty imperial blue ripple above her like anxious spectators. Each diadem weighs a pound in precious metals, heavy enough to remind wearers of their burdens. A torchbearer edges closer, the flame warped by heat into shapes that resemble phantom guards. The light glitters against sapphires so deep they could swallow galaxies. A visiting envoy from Lydia leans in, whispering that these crowns outdo any royal headgear in Sardis. His tone implies a challenge. Beauty as weapon, assuming that flash can topple armies. Nearby, courtiers fiddle with lapis lazuli beads, rolling them between their fingers in restless meditation. They say a well-crafted diadem can single-handedly broker alliances, more persuasive than any treaty signed in ink. Cassandra picks up a circlet adorned with emerald bees, their wings carved in microscopic detail. She imagines the weight of that symbol, prosperity perched atop fragile loyalty. Outside, siege engines groan against wooden palisades, reminding everyone that luxury and conflict lean on the same axle. A guard shifts uneasily, his metal breastplate resonating like distant thunder in a silent storm. Cassandra slips the emerald circlet onto her head, feeling the cold wash of metal against her forehead. The diadem settles with a soft click, like the final stone in a temple's lintel. One wrong shift and all crumbles. Torch flickers catch on her cheekbones, creating a halo that feels both divine and ironic. She steps down from the dais, each stride measured as if walking a tightrope above the battlefield. A court musician strikes a single chord on a lyre, its tone as somber as a funeral bell echoing through empty halls. The diadem's gems catch that note, fracturing it into a slow, crystalline echo. In that reflection, Cassandra sees both a queen and a pawn. The diadem sparkles with silent threats. Loyalty demands sacrifice, and sacrifice can be sold. An advisor hisses that Mycenaean scouts were spotted at dawn, proof that elegance won't shield them. Cassandra glances upward at the carved relief of Athena, her spear poised, as if judging this glittering charade. The contrast between opulence and peril feels like glimpsing a royal procession through barred gates, beautiful yet unreachable. She lifts a second diadem, a band of twisted platinum set with moonstone, and weighs its promise of mythical protection. Moonstone's sheen reminds her of rumors that goddesses favored Troy, though deities are as capricious as desert winds. With a breath, she trades the emerald bees for the moonstone glow, making a silent pact with fortune. Courtiers murmur that this crown will be her allegiance to the city above her bloodline. Each whisper feels like a ripple across a still lake, small yet destined to become waves. Cassandra stands under the chandelier of iron torches, diadem gleaming as if daring fate. In that moment, she realizes that in Troy, a woman's power is measured by how brightly she can shine before the siege's shadow swallows her light. And in the hush that follows, the jeweled crowns gleam with the collective breath of an empire on the brink. And so, as the echoes of desire and destiny settle into the quiet of night, allow your mind to soften and your breath to deepen. Feel the tension of ancient battles and impossible choices gently dissolve, leaving you wrapped in the calm hush of history's final breath. Close your eyes, let each heartbeat lull you further into tranquility, and drift peacefully into dreams where time has no hold. Good night, and may your rest be as timeless as the stories we've shared.